My brother faked cheating screenshots and mom kicked me out. 3 years later, I bought his firm and brought the feds to our reunion. None of this makes sense without understanding the architecture of what transpired. So, I'll give you the context. At first glance, it seems like a petty revenge story. It wasn't. There was structural demolition. A mid-size urban infrastructure firm in a large coastal metropolis employed me as a structural engineer at 29. It's not a career that makes dinner party guests excited. Not glamorous. However, it pays well, silently protects thousands of individuals every day, and suits someone who thinks in systems, variables, and load distributions. I was proficient. I liked solving intricate spatial problems that stayed solved. I liked that if I performed my arithmetic well, a bridge, building, and people would be safe. Same ideals guided my life. Maya made ceramics. She had a modest, sunny studio downtown, a loyal clientele who bought her custom pieces, and a captivating manner of portraying a clay glaze like a living organism. We met at a mutual friend's art display on a dreary Tuesday night. I knew nothing about ceramics, kilns, or art. She had no idea of load-bearing calculations, tensile strength, or concrete curing. For 4 great years, the vast difference between our worlds was plenty, balanced each other. I grounded her, she colored me. We got engaged 8 months before the collapse, not a dramatic or theatrical proposition, no hidden photographers or flash mobs. On a Sunday morning, we sat at her paint-stained kitchen table with black coffee and a ring. I spent 3 months choosing to compliment her style. My statement was cut off by her yes. I believed my life was secure. Brother Julian is 3 years older than me. I want to be realistic about who he was to avoid turning him a cartoon villain. Real villains don't twirl mustaches. He was more specific, common, and dangerous than a caricature. He was charming in the way amoral people are. He was eternally adaptive, immensely contemplative, and always showed you a personalized version of himself according to the time. Apex Horizon Group was his commercial real estate brokerage. The mid-size, fast-growing company relied on networking, handshakes, and unshakable credibility. Julian knew optics well. Everything else, money, friends, and personality, was borrowed. My mother adored him like some parents love their firstborn blindly, without a character check. Despite never saying so, she treated me as an afterthought for 30 years. It was like bad weather. I made peace with it. You don't yell at rain, you get an umbrella. The night I died was a typical extended family gathering. Aunts, nosy neighbors, a sweltering evening when someone always talks too much about their kitchen remodel. Maya and I were there. Sharing appetizers on the sofa, we relaxed. It was unnecessary to feel uncomfortable. The base felt solid. Julian stood after an hour, clinked his glass. He stated something crucial was due. His voice was controlled, reluctant, and heavy with faux sadness, like what he was about to do was costing him his soul. He presented his phone, and passed a tablet around. Screenshots, dozens. A woman I had never met sent a lengthy text to my phone number. Graphic, intimate, and explicit messages could end an engagement 10 times. He screenshotted a lingerie-clad woman, with a timestamp matching a weekend. I was supposed to be away for an engineering conference. It was disastrous. It was carefully forged. Chloe came from the back of the room before I could absorb the ridiculousness of what I was seeing. I dimly recognized her as an event coordinator or assistant from Julian's large professional circle. She gazed at Maya with a lovely pity face. She said she saw me leaving a downtown boutique hotel with the woman in the text 2 months ago. Her description of my favorite leather jacket was amazing. My car's license plate was described. She specified a time and date. The room changed in 90 seconds. It takes exactly that long. 90 seconds for 24 people who have known you your whole life to entirely restructure what they know about you into an unpleasant new shape. Thick air filled the space. A deafening hush. I regarded Maya. Expected confusion. I expected her to yell, demand explanations, and ask whether it was true. No tears fell from her face. Complete blankness was far worse. It was neither anger, nor devastation. A door silently closed behind her eyes. She said nothing. She took the engagement ring I spent 3 months choosing from her jacket pocket, and set it on the oak coffee table in front of her. Metal clanked against wood. She did it without looking at me. Tried to talk. Julian interrupted me when I said, "This is insane. It should be loud and forceful enough to dominate the acoustic space without being pushy or yelling." He occupied the entire room. I could feel it. Before I spoke, a guilty verdict was stamped and confirmed. My mother crossed the room to join Julian. I still think of her expression when I'm alone in the dark. It wasn't rude. No cruelty was intended. It was just certain. "She was never meant for you," my mother stated. She spoke clinically, like she was correcting a tax return factual error. I waited another 30 seconds in the living room. No one defended me. No one inquired further. No one requested to authenticate my texts on my phone. Maya stared at the table. Julian was already talking again, directing the gathering, and guiding the throng toward normalcy as the protective elder brother who had saved Maya from a monster. No screaming. I didn't flip tables. I grabbed my jacket off the chair back, opened the front door, and left in the cool night air, not a glance back. They never saw me as they believed I was again. I had made a permanent decision as I drove north from that driveway without a destination, but they didn't know. I wasn't mad. My anguish wasn't showing. I was calculating coldly. I drove without music for 6 hours. I wanted full silence to think, not because I was in a dramatic, weeping morning spiral. Only clear thought mattered now. As the sun rose above the roadway as I crossed the state line, I envisioned a new architecture. It wasn't revenge yet. Only a direction. I went to Oakhaven. The industrial hub was medium-sized and grimy. It was a location where nobody asks what led you there because half the population has a slightly different gloomy answer. I found a cheap, furnished, well-lit apartment. I joined a regional civil engineering consultancy in 3 weeks. I identified myself to my new supervisor as Arthur, my legal middle name, and my mother's maiden name shortened, Arthur Vance. It was clean, lawful, and invisible to non-searchers. I redirected my mail, closed my bank accounts, started new ones under Vance, and removed all my social media. Ghostly me. I won't lie. Oakhaven's first 4 months were the hardest. Grief doesn't schedule itself. Sideways. It hits you during a concrete poor site review or at 2 a.m. when the work is done and you're staring at the ceiling fan. Maya's death affected me differently than expected. Not exactly heartbreak. It felt more like the intense, terrible pain of seeing a good, authentic building wrecked by a phony. That is harder to process than a routine breakup. My only means of processing it did work. I watched. I recorded. Julian's Apex Horizon group was small but expanding publicly. He had commercial listings, great press mentions in local business periodicals, and a LinkedIn account he updated religiously with nauseating hustle and integrity. I read everything. Not obsessively systematically, the difference is huge. Was an engineer. Load distribution made sense. Every structure, from suspension bridges to corporations, has stress points. Find those stress areas to understand the system. Putting enough pressure on certain spots collapses the system. After 12 months of quiet, dogged, late-night investigation, I discovered Apex Horizon's valuation procedure had a catastrophic defect. Julian valued commercial properties far over market for high-net-worth clients. He was secretly funneling his exorbitant commissions through a Delaware shell firm. Not a clever Wall Street scam. The blunt force fraud worked because nobody was looking for it, not because it was clever. But I looked. I didn't act. Not yet. I recorded it. I timestamped all public records. I got LLC registrations. I compared property tax records to his sales data. Over 18 months, I meticulously developed an airtight digital file. I moved my money while compiling that forensic file. Living at Oakhaven was dirt inexpensive. My salary was substantial, and costs were nothing. I bought minority holdings in Apex Horizon's holding businesses through 3 convoluted layers of legitimate Arthur Vance investment entities. Julian was constantly raising finance by selling little stakes of equity to silent partners to support his next big initiative. Purchased tiny positions. Nothing that required legal disclosure. Everything seemed like ordinary portfolio diversification from a generic mid-level investing agency. But by month 22, the stakes had silently grown much larger. Julian sold parts of his bogus corporation to the guy he attempted to remove from the world. Julian and Maya were introduced to me around this time. I heard it from a loose acquaintance, a man outside the family who was unaware of the severe fallout. He casually suggested it over the phone. "Hey, saw your brother and Maya at a gallery opening. They looked pretty serious. You guys still not talking?" I hung up. I spent one day with that information in my peaceful flat. I analyzed data. I knew Julian wanted my life, not simply my death. After filing that emotion under noted, I opened my laptop and worked. Since Reddit expects a different narrative, I'll be honest. I wasn't scheming retribution every waking hour in a dark room like a comic book villain. I was creating a life. Arthur Vance was well known. I liked my modest flat. Marcus, my colleague, made horrible, bitter coffee but wrote perfect structural appraisals. My Oakhaven job was real. My soul rebuilding happened. My patience wasn't staged. When I stopped focusing on individuals who had previously defined me, I became who I was. Still, I updated the fraud file. I increased equity stakes. I monitored Apex Horizon's course as carefully as any load-bearing structure I was responsible for. 3 years after I left my life, a big envelope came at my Oakhaven address on a dreary Tuesday morning. A distant cousin, with my contact info, sent it expecting me to want it. The invitation to the yearly extended family reunion. Same house, same format, Same folks. I was still a guest. That may have been a clerical error, Julian's twisted joke, or my mother's passive-aggressive attempt to cover up. Not a problem. Sitting at my desk, I read the hefty cardstock invitation, twice. My second monitor displayed my investment portfolio summary. I opened the enormous 6-3-page fraud paperwork file on my third monitor. Now everything was ready. Every financial position was fixed. A complete, cross-referenced evidentiary file was undisputed. Federal proceedings initiated. Do not speak to anyone. Call me, immediately. Julian read the message. Then he read it again. I know he read it twice because I literally watched his eyes frantically track back and forth across the illuminated text. His grip on my arm didn't loosen immediately. It just entirely lost its purpose. There is a massive psychological difference between someone actively holding on to you in anger, and someone who is in such deep shock they simply forgot to tell their hand to let go. By the time he dropped his hand, it was the second one. He stumbled a step backward. He looked at the horrified faces of our family. He looked at the text message. He looked at me. I could see the gears grinding in his head as he did the exact same terrifying arithmetic that I had done 3 years ago, and he arrived at the exact same inescapable answer I had. There was absolutely no version of this reality where he was talking his way out. Not tonight. Not with his own attorney panicking. Not with 63 pages of airtight financial forensics already sitting on a federal prosecutor's desk. He tried anyway. Because it's all he knew how to do. He set this up, Julian whispered, his voice completely hollow. The performance was still barely there, but the foundation underneath it had completely shattered. You don't see what he's doing. He disappears, builds some insane fake case, shows up here just to humiliate the family. A few people in the room physically shifted, not toward him, they shifted away from him. It was the exact way weight redistributes when a floorboard starts to rot. You planted that evidence 3 years ago, I said calmly. That is not an accusation, it is a mathematical correction. And you paid a woman $4,500 to confirm it in front of everyone in this room. Nobody spoke, the air was dead. And then, Maya finally did. She hadn't moved from the spot near the doorway. When she finally spoke, her voice was so incredibly quiet, so fragile, that the entire room had to physically lean in slightly to catch the words. Which meant every single person heard her perfectly. I knew something was wrong, she said. Julian whipped his head toward her. Maya, shut up. Don't. About 6 months after. She continued, completely ignoring him. She said it without any heat, without any anger. She just placed the words in his path like a closed steel door. She kept her eyes focused on the middle distance. Not on me. Not on him. It was like she was speaking to the room itself, or maybe just finally speaking to her own conscience. There were things that didn't line up in his story, she said, her voice trembling but gaining strength. Dates. The way he talked about it. I asked him once, directly, about the timeline of the texts. He told me I was misremembering. He told me I was attaching unnecessary guilt to something that wasn't there because I just felt bad about how things ended with you. She paused. A tear finally tracked down her cheek, but she didn't wipe it away. He was very convincing. He usually is. The room was entirely with her now. As they were with Julian 3 years prior. Completely silent. Maya. I didn't push further. She now spoke precisely, like she had been holding their sharp shapes in her mouth for years, and was finally spitting them out. I told myself, it was because I believed him. But it wasn't that. She inhaled deeply. It was because I had already made my choice. I chose to stay. And admitting that I had made that choice based on a lie meant admitting that I had thrown away something real, something good, just because it was easier to believe the loud version of the story that didn't require me to actually trust my own instincts. She didn't want my forgiveness. She wasn't looking for a hug or reaction. It was a true confession. She said it to expel the poison from her body, not to get my forgiveness. I lingered on her, processed data, then I nodded, a nod that says, I hear you. I know, that guilt is now yours, not mine. I returned to the room. Julian was slightly hyperventilating. She's upset. She's hysterical. She doesn't know what she's. Stop talking. My mother. She crossed the room undetected. She was now 3 feet away. She appeared 10 years older than 20 minutes earlier. She appeared to have completed a brutal moral calculation she had avoided for her entire adulthood. She wasn't crying. She wasn't dramatic. It was just her. Done. She stared at me in agony. Her eyes searched mine for her former son. He was lost to her. I should have listened to you, she whispered, her voice cracking with realization, held her gaze. I didn't make the silence comforting. I didn't hug her. I denied her the cheap, easy forgiveness she craved. Yes, I said smoothly, you should have. She felt the word's impact. She closed her eyes and nodded slowly. She didn't argue. Through the large front bay window, I saw movement outside. Behind Julian's rusted, broken-down car, a dark, unmarked federal sedan pulled up to the curb. Two professionally dressed people entered the streetlights. They were leisurely. They walked up the front path and stood on the porch, waiting with the terrifying patience of people who know how the evening will end. I scheduled their arrival 4 days prior. Formal notice of proceedings. Freeze civil assets first, then attach criminal warrants securely. I took my tablet from the table. I faced the front door. Julian extended and grabbed my arm again. Tougher this time. Fingers in my jacket. Pure animalistic desperation. The terror of a man watching his fake kingdom burn. I stopped walking. I stayed put. I looked down at his shaking hand on my sleeve. Then I slowly looked up at his face. I stared at him without hurry or anger. I regarded him like an engineer views a pile of scrap metal. "Let go," I said. Single sentence. No volume increase. Not a threat. Just a command. Outside, the two federal agents stepped together toward the heavy wooden door. Julian relented. He held on because I physically intimidated him. It wasn't necessary. He let go because the two people on the front porch had just knocked on the door, and the heavy authoritative sound shook the silent house like a judge's gavel. The moment finally took shape. Its sharp edges were closing in on his throat. Walking forward, I opened the front door. The taller agent introduced herself quietly, showed her credentials, and gave Julian a thick, sealed manila envelope. Official proceeding notice. Warning of asset freeze. Added criminal referral. She was professional, brief, and completely unmoved by delivering federal indictments into a living room full of stunned family members who had just seen a 3-year web of lies dismantled in 40 minutes. Past the agents. Julian stared down at the heavy envelope with both of his shaking hands in the doorway, unsure what to do with the weight of his own consequences. After walking down the driveway, I got in my car, started it, and drove out into the evening. Within 48 hours, the government froze Apex Horizon Group. I was surprised by how quickly the regulatory body moved, indicating that my forensic file was cleaner than expected. Julian's broker licenses were federally reviewed within a week. As soon as the inquiry became semi-public, his wealthy clients, whose loyalty he had carefully cultivated through expensive dinners, golf games, and the social performance he had spent his career perfecting, stopped returning his calls. An industry based on trust and optics works that way. The moment the shiny appearance cracks, trust disappears to discover the truth. No explosion shattered his empire. It shrank quietly, systematically, just like weak structures fail when their load exceeds their capacity. Maya resolved her issue differently. Julian's wealthy network helped her ceramics business more than she realized. Gallery introductions, high-end collector referrals, exclusive event placements. When Julian's network violently retreated to avoid federal prosecution, all those lucrative channels closed. She remained. I want to clarify that. Not completely destroyed. But she was severely reset. She had to start over without Julian's credibility, to support her art career. If she rebuilt something from that humble beginning was her business, not mine. I didn't want her to fail. I also no longer wanted her story in my life. I was called by my mother 3 weeks later. Sitting in my Oakhaven apartment, received the call. I listened to her full apology. Very measured. She didn't cry. That she wasn't dramatic. It was admirable. She said, she was so wrong. After the reunion, she spent 3 weeks alone in her house, contemplating what she had allowed, and what she had said to me that night 3 years ago. She realized both were crushingly heavy. She finished her speech without interruption. Next I said, you made your choice the same night everyone else in that room did. I have made mine since. Her silence was long and heavy. Line static hummed. Is there a way back? She whispered. I don't know yet, I confessed. But this was the right place to start. I meant it. I wasn't always slamming doors on her. I was being mathematically accurate about where the door was, not where we both wanted it. That was the most genuine gift I could give her. I think she knew that deep down. Next morning, I worked. Back to consulting. Marcus's burnt coffee again. Back to municipal infrastructure assessments, blueprints, and Arthur Vance's quiet, solid life in the empty space, left after everything was violently taken away. Really good work. The apartment had plenty of sunlight. New name still fits me well. I've thought a lot about what internet readers expect from this story. The screaming rage is usually desired. They want movie-style speech drama. They want the OP to violently break down in the car steering wheel, crying over what he lost, or stare into the rain at something that symbolizes his broken heart. I missed that moment. I drove away from that house with the deep satisfaction of seeing a system work as intended. Every variable was considered. Every load was distributed properly. Unlucky outcome. It was right. Call. 2. The world was finally reflecting the truth that had always been there, waiting for someone to stop emotionally arguing with it and build the case. They thought disappearing and crying was the worst thing I could do. Disappearing won. Silence didn't mean inaction. A construction site. I never returned to that house for emotional closure. I returned when the structure was ready. Load was calculated perfectly. Just show up, pull the pin, and let gravity do its thing. I exited by closing the door. Not a massive crash. Just firm. How to permanently close something.